Hello and welcome to Nigeria, the road to 2019, a series of programs where Arise News places the audience and the choice at the heart of our coverage of the upcoming presidential elections. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, all the news, comment and analysis that provide unrivaled insight into Nigeria 2019, including with Africa's biggest ballot around the corner, the opposition People's Democratic Party is hoping for a tectonic shift in Nigerian politics, a shift that will change the gears and help bring the PDP back into the corridors of power. Could the times be moving in their favor, or is the ruling APC much too strong a force to easily dislodge from power? We talk with the spokesman of the Atiku campaign organization, Mr Segun Showunmi. Now, nearly 4 years ago, the People's Democratic Party, or PDP, was voted out of presidential office after 16 continuous years in power. Now, in opposition, the PDP is locked in a massive struggle to try to win back lost ground, hoping that the political dynamics will swing in their direction. But even with what the party says is an undercurrent of roiling resentment against the ruling APC party of President Buhari, the PDP and its presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, know that it will take a monumental surge to get them from the sidelines into the centerpiece of executive power in Nigeria. So, is that likely to happen? Or is it, as the APC would put it, an impossible outcome? What does the party and its presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, have in store for Nigerians that would convince them to tilt their support in favor of Mr. Abubakar? Well, let's talk now to one of the would-be president's men who's in the front line of the battle to win over the electorate in Atiku Abubakar's favor. He's the spokesman of the Atiku campaign organization, Segun Showunmi, and he joins me now in the studio. How delightful to see you, sir.
Charles, it's always a pleasure around you. You're good at your trade. Good evening, Nigerians.
I think you're pretty good at yours, but so is the APC. We've got to have balance here. So that's why we quite really enjoy talking with you. But, I mean, you and I were talking about this just a moment ago. There seems to be a lot of silence around this campaign so far. I mean, I seem to remember in 2015 that by this time there was a lot of noise being made. But this time it seems almost sepulchrally silent, a sort of surreal quiet. Perhaps a quiet before the storm?
I tell you what, it's down to the quality of the candidate and the personality of Atiku Abubakar. Nigerians will remember that in the build-up to the 2015 election, the narrative around the political space was extremely toxic. Everything appeared like people were at war of words. They raised the bar to such a point that it almost became felony, where they were saying, oh, countries should not sell arms to their country. They didn't care whether the commander-in-chief at that time, Jonathan, was trying to solve a problem. They played politics with everything and anything. But you know what? Atiku Abubakar is a statesman. He's a pan-Nigerian leader who understands that in spite of political contest, there is a need to lower the toxic nature of political discourse and narrative management. And he has put a very firm instruction that gentlemen around me, my fans, my followers, my support groups, engage on issues, because the challenges before the Nigerian people is so huge that we needn't add more to it by splitting them up or making the entire atmosphere charged, living with it, the consequence that the president, when he wins, will have to deal with bigger issues in calming free nerves. So what you see here now is a political campaign that is methodologically crafted to speak to issues. You would have noticed that after our very well-organized primaries, we moved into the next phase where we put together a policy document. And you would have also noticed, as a departure from what would have happened before, where you bring in only the top echelon of society into a meeting and talk about the policy, and you speak above the heads of Nigeria. We went for Facebook Live. We spoke the candidates, spoke the policies to the Nigerian people, where the vast majority of the Nigerians can easily tap into it, and we put it on the website that is advertised, and laid before them bare the policy document that all Nigerians can reach it, can engage it, can discuss it. It's a deliberate but conscious step away from yappity yap, lots of words, hot air that means absolutely nothing, to place before Nigeria that this is a presidential candidate that is responsible, that will carry the duty of a commander-in-chief with dignity, and will be conscious of the fact that Nigeria needn't shame itself, needn't split itself, needn't make itself difficult to be one country because of politics. And that's why you see that work is going on, but the work is a bit simmer, the language is a bit tempered, and it's a little bit more to unite all Nigerians. So that's what you're seeing. Of course, as we go along, there will be a bit of increase in the tempo, but that tempo itself will be such that it's not going to be like the kinds of campaign that the APC got Nigeria involved in.
Well, it was
2014-15.
It was just interesting that I would have thought that by now, particularly for a party like yours, that is really the one who's got to, got to prove that they've got what it takes to displace the incumbent, that you would have been, up and running by now. In other words, hit the ground running. And it just seems a bit all very kind of
you're Nigerians,
very slow.
Charles, you guys are only used to, in 1999 when we came in, you were used to boot-jack military commanding everybody and shoving everybody in the wrong direction. In 2014, you got fed with narrative that was dangerous for the corporate existence of the country.
And who was feeding that narrative?
That was the APC trying to take power, doing everything, shaming the wife of the president, shaming the country, just basically misbehaving.
Well, it's interesting that
now,
you say
what you're seeing now is that in spite of the fact that we want to take the leadership from them because they have really behaved badly and they've not delivered on their promises, we're responsible enough to know that a nation like Nigeria will suffer too much if the political players are unbraided in their utterances and unguarded in the way they carry narrative. Other than that, you have seen that the PDP is a very big party. It has structures all over. People are in the grassroots doing their campaign. Support groups are moving around. The candidate itself is reaching out to people. We're doing a lot of quiet event, but meaningful event. They may not be the, oh, go and burn Nigeria, or we're going to put people's blood, or we're going to put the Atlantic Ocean to nah. We're not even telling anybody to be thrown. So,
in other words, you're trying to run a more sophisticated campaign.
We're running a more responsible and diligent and sophisticated campaign.
Right, you talked about...
And you're going to find out that if you watch us, we have insisted that this particular campaign, because Nigeria is in a hurry and Nigeria has a reason to be, this campaign cannot be about hot words and promises that cannot be validated. We're more interested, not in the promises per se, but in the plan that shows the Nigerian people how exactly we plan to make their lives better.
Right. Well, we'll talk about those support groups a bit later.
Okay.
Because there's quite a few of them who are kind of...
I know your friend that was here the other day.
Well, he's not my friend.
We'll get to him when we get there.
There's some of them are straddling.
Yeah, we'll get to him when we get there. One or two disgruntled elements will always exist.
But you mentioned a point when you talked about in 2015 that the APC was playing politics. I mean, the impression that was given at the time was that it was the PDP who were playing politics.
How could it have been?
Because the PDP postponed the elections, and the impression that was given, and certainly the impression that most Nigerians had, was that that postponement was to increase the political and electoral advantage that the PDP had at the time, which appeared to be waning in February, and they needed to gain the upper hand with a very nettlesome area, which was security, in order to say, hey, look what we've done with security. And so they postponed the election.
Charles.
So who was playing politics?
Charles, government has a responsibility to look at the space and determine what is in the best interest of all. And the decision to postpone was done at the highest level of the Council of State, where all former leaders of the country come in to get the evidence. The kinds of evidence you cannot put into public space. The only man that was absent was Buhari, obviously. And the postponement was done because there were a couple of actions that the military was going to take out to ensure that the northeastern zone will be ready for elections.
Action that should have been taken way before the eve of the election.
You know, Charles, this comment of yours has driven me to one of the most difficult comments I'm going to have to make as a public analyst.
Right.
And as a spokesman of the presidential campaign. When the Boko Haram insurgency started, leaders at that time opted for a couple of activities, the carrot and the stick. His Eminence, as I like to call him, Olusegun Obasanjo, offered himself to go and negotiate with the very first leader of that organization. Somehow, the guy got lost and he was killed. And it metastasized into the hands of some much more deadly people. The leader of the country at that time, Jonathan, was struggling to keep it under wraps because insurgencies are not that easy to contain. The role of the then opposition, Muhammadu Buhari and co., was such that they were not supporting anything that would appear like they were going after the insurgents. They're quoted in public space as saying that they supported the insurgency. They went to the extent of blackmailing their country and preventing their country and almost saying that nations of the world should not even sell arms to their country. That was the kind of circumstances underneath which they came into power. Alas, they are in power now. And they have been for close to 4 years. Except you have no vein and blood of the Nigerian, you're not a true Nigerian. You couldn't be happy with what has become of our troops. This is the Nigerian army, the Nigerian armed forces that could stem insurgency in Liberia, that could banish restiveness in Syria alone, that delivered to the accolades of the international community in a joint United Nations work, keeping peace in the sub-region and above, outside the sub-region. Suddenly, we have become a nation where people are killing our troops are not getting the necessary air cover, the general control and command of the armed forces itself has been relinquished to people who are unaware of
well, in fairness to the fairness to the governing party.
What is fair to
well,
them?
let me just make the point. In fairness to them, when they came into power, there were several local governments in northeast Nigeria that were under the control of Boko Haram. None of those, Boko Haram doesn't have really any territorial claim any longer today. Well, I'm simply stating the facts.
No, you're not stating the facts.
So for you to suggest that somehow, you know, things have worsened
hold on a second.
considerably under their rule,
hold on a second, Charles.
Yeah.
Charles, the danger of the media is that one piece of information can begin to assume the life of truth, whereas it's a lie. There was no way local governments in the northeast would have been under the control of Boko Haram, and you would have had the celerity to produce an election result in each of the polling booths there. It was all the manipulation of the APC and their followers with their partners, the disgruntled, the lack of intelligent and investigative journalism that the Nigerian nation have been fostered with, propagated by propaganda, lies and innuendos, and anything they could throw in to demonstrate that the government wasn't working.
Well, I think at the
end of the day,
yes,
you need to ask yourself, if Boko Haram was in charge of the northeast, where did INEC and the parties that participated in the election, where did they get the results from? What am I saying to you? I am not excusing that the Boko Haram challenge has been around for some time and government have been struggling with it. Listen.
Are you saying that it has not improved since your
I am saying that there is no reason why any Nigerian should be happy with the handling of the country now.
Well, clearly it's not over.
No. It's not just not over.
Yeah.
It's worse. In the former times, our troops, the soldiers, the men and women of our armed forces at least knew that they couldn't engage without protection. And the casualty was a lot less. Right now, we have become the joke of all nations that are doing...
Okay, let me just come in here.
Okay,
let me come in here. Your party, the PDP,
yes,
was in power for 16 years.
Yes.
And a significant percentage of that time, the Boko Haram, I think it started in 2009 or around that period, all the way up to 2015 when you left office, it kept deepening incrementally. So you spent upwards of 6 years battling that insurgency. You couldn't deal with it. In other words, you couldn't end it. The APC, in fairness to you, have not been able to end it either. What would you do differently now to tackle that insurgency if you came into power in 2019?
Atiku Abubakar has learned from the best. He had had a great opportunity to stand on the shoulders of giants, looking at what they see, removing their mistake, doing some introspection, and now he's able to come to the table with his own experience and the best capacities of Nigeria. What are the things that he would do differently? It is only a nation that wants to be pitied that will insist that you're going to keep applying the same tactics. You're not getting results.
Yeah, but that's why we're asking you, what are your tactics going to be?
Charles,
yeah,
that some of the things we're going to do is, one, we're going to pay more attention to our borders. Atiku has the capabilities to so do. Why? Because he's got 20 years of being a custom officer and a significant part of those years being in charge of the northern borders. If we can keep foreigners in and out of our countries checked, if we can reduce small and light arms coming into our country, if we can say to our neighbors that we will insist that you don't allow terrorists coming from your country here, otherwise we will fortify our borders and make it exceedingly difficult for criminal elements to come in as a first step. We will also ensure that we do a comprehensive security audit. What is a security audit? A security audit is a security process where you check properly what is the manpower that you have, how much more manpower do you need, what is the requirement of arms you have, what do you need to get more, and where do you need to get it. There are quite a few partner nations around the world. There's Russia, there's China, that can also be encouraged to sell arms to us. We'll also be wondering and be interested in ensuring that the armed forces of our country, under the next Commander-in-Chief, His Excellency Atiku Abubakar, by the grace of God, to make sure that every soldier who goes out fully kitted, goes out totally prepared, goes out with security cover via the armed forces working in tandem and in unity with itself. One of the challenges that they have now is that they have an armed forces that is not even following his own rules of engagement and his own operational manual. What do I mean? The armed forces is a command and control structure. When it is time for one general to go because it belongs to one cause, he is expected to go so that other people that are in line can take on the responsibility and go do the job. What you have had is that you've had them keeping officers beyond their normal retirement age at the expense of more officers who can be put forward to come and try. Over and above that, they have the Commander-in-Chief now, Muhammadu Buhari, has not paid enough attention to the relationship between the organs that are under him. That's why you have a DSS writing a report against an EFCC. That's why you have the armed forces of Nigeria, especially in Matele, going in there to go and do rescue operation without Air Force cover. How could it have been excusable that the Air Force did not provide cover for this foot soldier? The armed forces or any war must first of all be waged by generals who are conscious, who are alert to what the issues are. And what are the issues? You need to do the estimation. Do you have enough requirement, resources, logistics to prosecute the war? How do you want to prosecute the war? Does your command and control structure have enough capability to motivate the troops to go out there and snatch victory for you? Why should Nigeria, who can finish an insurrection in Liberia, who can banish miscreants in Syria alone, suddenly be struggling in their own country.
The interesting thing I find, and actually, to be honest with you, I mean, your voice is really quite powerful. I mean, the last time you and I talked, you were a heck of a lot less powerful than you are. You sound quite angry there.
No, I will be. Every Nigerian, you should be angry.
I understand that, but you know...
Charles,
yes.
You should ask yourself, what does it mean to call ourselves the most populous nation in the world?
No, I understand all that, but let me get a word in.
We cannot have people dying every day.
I totally appreciate that, and I think a lot of people would agree with you.
Thank you.
But let me get a word in here.
All right.
A lot of what you're saying, I mean, we could quite literally switch all this to 2014, 15, and the APC was saying exactly the same thing about the AP, about the BDP.
They weren't.
Well, the fact remains that you were unable to effectively dislodge Boko Haram in the northeast, which is why the problem continues to linger today. And you could make the same argument that the APC have failed to dislodge. So is there a case for neither the PDP nor the APC to be the ones in charge of security in this country?
I have always wondered...
Because both of you have failed.
I've always wondered if every time we need to pick a president, if the issue is the party or the issue is the president that we want to put on board.
Well, they're part and parcel of the same thing, aren't they?
It's a chicken and egg approach.
Yes.
One never knows which comes first. But I tell you this, the monk does not make the man. The man makes the office. What is missing over the years is that you don't have any one of them until before Obasanjo, after Obasanjo, beg your pardon, until now that we're having Atiku, who has prepared himself for the responsibility at hand. In Atiku's case, he has been the former vice president. He was aware of how Obasanjo and himself managed the first set of issues around Sharia, and how they stamped it and nipped it in his board. Atiku comes with extra competence because he's also had the opportunity of watching for 12 years on the sideline, seeing how his nation has been bleeding, asking questions, taking knowledge and notes of other nations in the world, and interfacing with them on the best way using technology to solve the Nigerian problem. There is also the need for a leader to be alive to his responsibility. Look, when a leader is weak, either as a result of age or as a result of illness, one of the major challenges that the nation faces is that that leader must or will necessarily be captured by those who claim to be his loyalists, the so-called cabal. We are not used to a country where when it is time for a commander-in-chief to go based on the service record of either 35 years or age, we're not used to a country where we keep increasing and pushing up the goalpost at the expense of other officers who are already waiting to take command, and some of them who are also eager and excited to be able to deliver their best. The army is structured in such a way that the rank and file also know when it is time for their commander-in-chief to go and the new commander-in-chief come on board. The government has a right to appoint anybody as commander-in-chief, but it is an anathema. It's an aberration. It is tantamount to making sure that the army is not even at peace with itself when you're keeping people beyond their retirement age. The only justification, perhaps, you may have for that is if they are delivering on the job. If they are not delivering on the job, then you have no reason to retain them.
You've made that point. Let's change direction.
All right, let's go somewhere else.
Let's change direction and let's talk about the values that your candidate, Atiku Abubakar, not only holds dear, but make him who he is.
Thank you.
Because you talked about him and Obasanjo. Over a period of time, they ran Nigeria for 8 years. But he lost the confidence of President Obasanjo while he was in office. And Obasanjo wrote a scathing book that, I mean, roundly indicted Mr. Atiku on various levels. That is why I am asking you, Because if he loses the confidence of the person that he worked very closely with as his number two, why should the Nigerians trust Mr. Abubakar?
Very good. Human emotion is very fickle. Sometimes when you have rubbed yourself up the wrong way, not really on the job, but because of some interpersonal relationship, some of us are more verbose than each other. And the ones that are a bit more verbose may ventilate in manners that suggest that the issues are bigger than they are. But what you need to ask is, what is the position of Obasanjo now?
Well,
was it not the same?
We have to put it in context.
I'm putting it in context for you.
We have to look at it in historical context.
Obasanjo now, and almost every other leader in the country, to be signposting for Atiku Abubakar, what it simply means is that everything they've had as issues with him no longer matters when what is at stake is the survival of the entity called Nigeria.
Yeah, but if there were...
And they have looked...
If there are allegations, specific allegations made against him, those allegations won't disappear. They remain in the minds of the Nigerian people.
On my way to the studio,
yeah,
somebody made a damning allegation against you, Charles and Yogolo. Do you know what I replied? I said, you don't just make allegations. If Charles have done those things you say you are alleging, give me the evidence. Give me the charges. Atiku has been out of power for 12 years now. And even when he was in the presidency, when he was the vice president, he's someone who had a lot of strong views. If there was any real issue, you know and I know that there would have been bigger consequences. Suffice to say, what is possible and what can be possible for Nigeria with an Atiku presidency is, what does it bring to the table?
Yes, and that's...
And what does Atiku bring to the table?
Right.
Atiku brings significant relationship with every section of Nigeria. The Igbos, the Hausa, the Tiv, the South. Therefore, he's a pan-Nigerian who has lived the pan-Nigerian dream. Because at the early stage of his mentorship, he came across a leader who said, we must build the bridge of unity across Nigeria. And Atiku has been on that, and he has lived his life. So that means he will unite Nigeria. Nigeria needs to create jobs. Everything said long and short, end the house, Nicolaus. You need to figure out how you're going to open up your economy to create more jobs for your people. Atiku is a consummate job creator. He's done that in private sector. He did that when he was in government, opening up the economy and liberalizing it. So you know he has the capability to do that. Atiku has enough significant experience at managing the borders. I keep hampering on that. Look, I don't believe that Nigerians dislike themselves so much till Nigerians will be slaughtering themselves at the rate at which we are hearing. I am of the suggestion, probably we will find the evidence someday, that most of the things that is affecting us and afflicting us by way of this insurgency is from the cross-border. People coming from other area, maybe this other country, and therefore you need somebody that can stem up the borders of Nigeria and say enough is enough. If the United States of America under the President Donald Trump can say to Americans that, look, we have an immigration problem, I'm not going to allow this, I'm not going to allow that because Americans must get the jobs, then out of getting jobs or staying alive, which one is more important? I trust that Atiku Abubakar will stabilize our borders and ensure that it can reduce the inflow of people, criminal element, and small arms. Also, the big elephant in the room, Charles, we can pretend all we want. We can call ourselves a federal republic. If we are not a federation that is true to itself, we're living a lie and we're running a lie that cannot work and has not worked.
Right, okay.
So Atiku will restructure the country.
Right.
When you put all of it together, the next question you'll ask, are the Nigerian people better off today than they were 5 years ago?
Well, I'd like you to hold that thought.
Okay, I'll hold the thought.
Because we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about that and a lot of other things. You're watching Nigeria, the road to 2019. Plenty more still ahead, including we continue our very feisty chat with the spokesman of the Atiku campaign organization, Mr. Segun Showunmi. In addition to other issues, we'll talk about a coalition of nearly 150 groups that used to support Mr. Atiku's presidential ambition, but have now turned against him. Stay with us. Welcome back to Nigeria, the road to 2019. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, if you thought that the crisis of internecine squabbles and incivility and fists being thrown around are limited to the ruling APC party alone, then think again. Because in the opposition PDP coalition, there's also considerable disgruntlement. Its arrowhead is a movement that calls itself the Aggrieved Atiku Support Group Coalition, a collection of 146 groups that used to support Mr. Atiku but have now turned against him. Their chairman is Bello Osaratin Godspower, and until recently he was the coordinator of Atiku Reloaded for 2019, a support group for Mr. Atiku's presidential ambition, but not anymore. This week, they formally gave their support to President Buhari and are now known as the Asiwaju Reloaded PMB ambassadors of Nigeria. Take a listen to this report by Arise correspondent Nisi Gabriel.
This is the so-called Aggrieved Atiku Support Group, expressing their anger through songs. They have now rebranded as the Asiwaju Reloaded PMB ambassadors of Nigeria. The coordinator of the group says they are abandoning Atiku Abubakar because he hasn't recognized their efforts in campaigning on his behalf.
Our decision to quit Atiku Abubakar presidential project is informed and inspired by the outcome of wide consultations and engagement embarked upon over the past few months, as it were clearly observable that the Nigerian people are not interested in restarting Nigeria again. Knowing fully well that Nigeria is working and are ready to move en masse, as you can see for yourself, to the next level of economic prosperity, socio-cultural reintegration, and political stability.
They claim to have 145 affiliated support groups nationwide, and the coalition says it can deliver 5.5 million votes to President Muhammadu Buhari.
We direct our members to shift allegiance and key into the new order to mobilize en masse for President Muhammadu Buhari election bid come 2019. And I guarantee you, it's an understatement to say 5.5 million. We are even being provoked now to say 6 million.
The group also pledged allegiance to the leader of the ruling All Progressive Congress, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who promises to take care of them as they mobilize for Buhari. With the 2019 general elections approaching and more switching of allegiance likely, it is yet to be seen what impact this group will have. Nisi Gabriel, Arise News.
Well, with me in the studio to respond to that and to continue our chat about Atiku Abubakar's chances of wresting power from the incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari is the spokesman of the Atiku campaign organization, Segun Showunmi. Thank you very much indeed for staying
Charles.
with us. What's your reaction to that report?
I would just say that in the affairs of men, there will always be a few turncoats.
A few? That's 146 groups.
They bandish a statistic. Have you counted them?
Well, there were quite a few people in that audience.
Have you gotten the list of all? Listen, Charles, I know Bello. He was a little bit roughened up or maybe not happy with one or two people in the campaign organization. And rather than wait for the matters to be addressed, being the kinds of terrible person that he is, he has gone to do a macabre dance in front of the televisions, claiming and arrogating to himself more power than he really has. If you ask him what local government he belongs, he probably doesn't know. If you ask him what polling booth he's going to vote, he probably doesn't know. The fact is this: if somebody were to be so aggrieved, why are they aggrieved only around Asiwaju, the man they think can spend money?
Yeah, but the point is this. I have to make this point.
What is the point?
The point is that what it underscores for people who are looking from the outside in is that these are people who ostensibly gave their support, because we've been hearing about that group. They've been on television here many, many times, long before Atiku Abubakar declared that
supporting
he was going to. They supported him. They had cars that were branded. They had billboards up on his behalf. And if, after giving that much support, you don't appear to, and I don't know what form that recognition takes, but you don't appear to recognize them and to appreciate what they put in, it certainly gives the impression that to the ordinary Joe Blogs on the street that you are not really. I mean, you don't seem to be cognizant of the people who are supporting you.
Charles, thank God you said the word Joe Blog. The management of support groups and volunteers is a new phenomenon that is just taking root in Nigeria. A greater number of them do not even interpret the role well. In the first instance, before you can claim that you are aggrieved because you have not been recognized, you will have to ask, don't they have access to the leadership of the party? The answer is yes, they do. Are they not put into committees to work in support groups where they all work with themselves? The answer is yes, they are. If there is a small issue that maybe this was the grand design and the manipulation of those that are manipulating them, even Jesus Christ, who had only 12 disciples, he had to deal with an Iscariot.
Yeah, but you're saying maybe.
He had to deal with
the fact that you're saying maybe.
You're breaking it.
Well, I'm sorry, but the fact that you're saying maybe
Jesus Christ
suggests that you're not even aware of what is going on.
I'm using the word consciously. Jesus Christ, who had 12 disciples, had to deal with a Peter who was going to deny him a couple of times before the crow. Had to deal with an Iscariot who was going to obviously betray him. Had to deal with a Thomas who was going to be a doubter up to the end. What am I saying to you? When you have about 5,000 support groups, all of them jostling for recognition and to show capacity, and a good number of them are showing capacity, there will be one or two Osaratins who will think that they need to take the platform as something they need to go and negotiate with. But let me say, it's unfortunate. Political parties have to endure it. Even the APC is enduring it now. A good number of people from APC too, their support groups, are claiming that they want to come to us and they are coming in. It's all part of the lack of maturity of political ideology. You support a political person or a political philosophy or a political party based on the fact that you have thought about what they represent well and you have chosen to go with them. And if you will leave, like Akpabio, like this ones, what do we make of an Akpabio who was a 16-time strong member of the PDP, spent another 3 years as the minority leader? If an Akpabio can jump ship, do you want me to spend energy talking about these young ones who probably are only looking for people that will butter their bread and make their lives easy? Well, obviously, we have more than enough.
Right.
And more people are coming in every day.
The bottom line...
And the support groups are very well run.
Right.
And they are very large.
The bottom
if
line...
anybody is expecting that by being or coming up with one small group calling himself a support group for Atiku, if they are expecting that the interpretation of that is that there's some free money to be made. No. We are trying to institute a new culture of volunteerism. And every volunteer, especially the loyal ones, can be absolutely sure that when His Excellency says 40% is for the youth, 30% is for the women, it is they have to work.
Okay. Well, can I come in here, please?
Yeah, you can come in.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Here's a practical point.
What is it?
And that's got to do with not alienating those who support you.
Nobody has alienated them.
Can I just make the point? Because if the previous election in 2015 is anything to go by, less than half of the registered voters will cast their vote in the 2019 election. So is getting your own core supporters to the polls more important than spending time trying to convince those who are in the middle ground and are undecided? In other words, when you lose a constituency like the one we saw on television, and they're certainly getting a lot of attention, I mean, you're essentially, potentially, losing people who were already in your camp. I mean, doesn't that worry you?
Charles, let me say to you, and I need to say this calmly. Do you have an idea the number of members of the Buhari support organization that have come to us? We're just more mature than them. We're not the type of people who need to create drama because people are entering into our movement. If you visit the office one day, I will take you to the Directorate of Support Groups. On a daily basis, we have to process application of groups who want to be supporters, numbering more than 100. The young man that sits on that wall, Daniel, he works very hard just processing the application. What am I saying to you? We have no real way of preventing turncoats, disloyal, disgruntled moles from leaving. Perhaps when they even came in the first instance claiming to be supporting us, perhaps they came on an agenda that was simulated by their friends, their shadows of this world in APC. Right. And now maybe this is the time they expect them to come and unleash their annoying narrative on television. Look, the election of 2019 is beyond the political active ones. It's beyond you and I, Charles. The election of 2019 is a decision process for the vast majority of Nigerians who are temperate, who are reasonable, who can determine, has their life been better in 2019 than it was in 2015? Who can determine, do they feel safer today? Who can determine, have they lost 12 million plus jobs and would they be hoping to lose more? Who can determine, is the value of the naira worse? Who can determine the amount they pay for petrol from what it was in 2015 to 145 now? Who can determine how much they pay for kerosene and diesel? Who can determine how much they buy palm oil? Who can determine how much they buy rice? Who can determine how much they pay for transport? Who can determine what is their minimum wage? These are the people that needs to determine. Politics and leadership is too important a process to be left to politicians and their charlatans.
You see,
a few of them will have the opportunity
right.
to be given media space to talk. But the fact of the matter is that the Atiku Abubakar presidential support group base is very alive, is very active, and is very strong.
You see that the problem here is that you can obviously throw things. I mean, it's much easier to criticize than to be in government. I mean, that's a known fact. And I think the real comparison has to be, are people's lives better today than it was when the PDP was in power? And also, when you talk about things like, because I mean, everybody has known that it took a lot of political will to reduce the subsidy on petrol, which automatically would have led to the increase in prices. It didn't matter which government it was, because Jonathan, who was in your party, tried it a number of times and backed down, because he was afraid of the repercussions. I mean, there were protests and so on and so forth. He couldn't muster the political will to do it. But the fact is, the question is there more availability of fuel today than there was when the PDP was in power? Do we see the same queues that they used to see in Nigeria all the time? Do you still see them today? I mean, that's a fundamental question.
Yes, Charles, remind yourself, if you look in your archives, you'll find the rushes. After they took power up till 2018, the queues were always there.
Because that was a fallout.
Hold on, Charles.
That was a fallout of what they inherited.
Charles, are you asking me a question that I can answer?
Go ahead.
Or you're not giving me the opportunity
of course.
to answer? I need to know whether you're the APC man or I'm the PDP man. So let's take it easy.
I like that. Well, you should hear what they say about us.
Let us take it easy with ourselves, Charles. The difference between the Jonathan regime, which is one of the PDP regimes, and the Buhari regime is transparent honesty. At least Jonathan was honest enough to say we want to remove subsidy. The elements who should have supported the removal of subsidy for the greater good of all Nigerians claim that they don't even know the meaning of the word subsidy. Today, nobody can tell you who is appropriating the subsidy, who is paying for it, who is giving them the right. Has the National Assembly passed it? Everything around the oil sector under Buhari is now extremely opaque. You really don't have an idea, neither do you have a clue. You have the president himself doubling as the Minister of Petroleum, and yet...
Well, your president president of the PDP president of Obasanjo did something similar.
Are you going to compare the achievement of Obasanjo?
No. I am simply picking a specific point that you raised.
Within that sector, right? Are you going to compare who and what Obasanjo is to what we have now?
Well, I'll tell you what.
We have a moral duty as members of the fourth realm of the estate, those who can mold opinion, to stand above the fray. Fact is that You know, I know that nobody knows who is appropriating subsidy and who's giving them the power. Had the National Assembly been alive to its duty, people's heads should have rolled by now. Probably people should have been impeached.
Yeah, but the National Assembly is made up of a lot of PDP members.
Hello, when did that just happen? Are you going to say a National Assembly that they couldn't even manage their own majority?
Yeah, but
we're going to pay.
What I'm saying is that you're criticizing your party as well.
No, is PDP going to be responsible for their own inability to manage their majority until the majority fell to PDP? It's all part of their inability to manage anything.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's move to the issues.
I am ready to move, Charles.
Because rather than sort of because you said at the outset that one of the things that you were hoping to achieve with this election was to focus on the issue. Just remind us of the central focus
of our government,
of your campaign to try to oust the incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari and replace him with Atiku Abubakar. Just focus our minds once again on what your campaign manifesto is.
Thank you, Charles. The first is that we believe that Nigerians has lost a lot of jobs, and for a young population that has about 60–70% of its entire 200 million or so estimated population to be young, you cannot play with job creation. If you do, it's a time bomb waiting to happen. So the central policy of an Atiku Abubakar presidency is job creation.
Yes, anybody can say that, but how is he going to do it?
Exactly. You would have allowed me to finish my
talk,
Charles.
No, go ahead.
Exactly. The way he's going to do that is to make that as an integral policy of his government by opening up the economy for private sector discipline to come and take over and expand the present level at which you do things.
But every single government has said that, but unemployment keeps rising.
If you are looking for an example, I'll give you one in the Atiku Obasanjo regime. How many private television stations did you have in Nigeria then, and how many do you have now? And how many people are employed there? How many private petrol stations and upstream sector do you have, and how many do you have now? How many PFM, pension fund administrators, do you have then, and how many do you have now? Who are they employing? What's happening with Nollywood? What's happening with sports? What am I saying to you? You don't approach employment in government by imagining that government is going to be the sole provider of employment.
You have a point
Government's responsibility is to liberalize the space so that those with the competence and the money can come in and come and help you create job, and you can get the value. Job creations will be part of what we're doing. We're also going to be opening up the economy significantly. And by opening up the economy, what we mean is that we have seen other nations in the world, Israel, Scandinavia, America, we have seen that even China, we have seen that they have started to apply private sector discipline, private sector funding, private sector activities, and private sector drive as the engine of their growth. We're going to accelerate that and do that even more because we know how to so do. We're going to unite the country because we are worried that the country is too divided, and the division in the country could be responsible for some of the soft targets that the country has become. Why should Nigerians be killing themselves? We need to figure out what's going on there and give everybody a united country and create a new crescendo of what a Nigerian is and who a Nigerian is and what a Nigerian means and what is his duty and responsibility. Underneath a government that will represent the best of Nigeria.
Okay,
we're going to do security. Right. And by that, I mean, we're going to look at the lower rung of the ladder and figure out, among many things, if there's a need for us to give the procedure and the process by which you can do state police if they have the resources to do it, and how to plug into national police.
Right, you've talked
over and above that. We're going to find roles for the traditional leaders that are in the country now who do very little or are not charged to do more, to be the first rung of ladder of gathering security and intelligence.
Right. There's a very important topic I need to get to before we run out of time, because you talked about security quite a lot at the outset of this program. Yes, let's talk about restructuring.
Okay.
Everybody associates Atiku Abubakar with restructuring. And
Yes.
in fairness to him, he's banged on about it for a long time. Tell us exactly how, because it's a very big area. It's a very unwieldy area. Tell us exactly what he's going to do about restructuring if he wins
Charles,
the presidency.
I'm in a hurry to go. The first thing that His Excellency Atiku Abubakar is going to do once he sets up his government, and he's going to take 6 months for that, he's going to set up a special committee that will look at all of the reports 1995, 2005, 2014. Harmonize them and get what is the commonality so we can know what has been consistently been demanded.
That's all the different conferences and so on.
We'll harmonize them, pull out all of those harmonized stuff, look at the things that Nigerians have been clamoring and asking for. Which of those things can an executive sign away by executive order? Maybe things that are on the concurrent list that he can say, okay, you guys want to do this, I want to give that. He will give that out. Then he will look at the ones that require him to work with the legislature and the stakeholders of the country. And then say, look, Nigerians, our constitution was not created to be an obstacle for development. We have the power as Nigerians to determine what we need to change and that can give us the growth we need. And work with the legislator, given that he is very good at building consensus and pulling people together, adjust what needs to be adjusted. But one thing you can be sure is that within 6 to 8 months, maximum 1 year, Nigerians would have seen practical, restructured activities that government would have embarked upon. You know why? Because you're going to have in the office of president in Atiku Abubakar, not somebody who is playing lip service to restructuring. No, somebody who has been standing on restructuring for such a long time, who has written on restructuring, who had advocated restructuring, and by that time, by the grace of God and the help of all Nigerians, on whose table the buck will end.
Yeah, but
so
what I would have
does
thought,
not restructure, then it will be who is it
yeah,
going to
but I
replace
would
the
have
buck?
thought that given the amount of time he spent on it, you'd be very clear on exactly what is he. Are we talking about political restructuring, fiscal restructuring, a combination of all of those?
Charles,
which is he going to do first? We need to be very specific
Charles,
so people understand.
I have answered you as specifically.
Yeah, well, you said he's going to harmonize previous reports. That's not.
Hold on,
that
Charles.
doesn't tell us anything.
I've answered you as responsibly as any commander-in-chief should answer. Atiku is not going to come and start interpreting his own desires as the restructuring agenda of Nigerians. Atiku will have to take the reports that's on the table and look for the commonality. By commonality, I mean those things that have been consistently been demanded. Then he can take those ones and then he can go back and look at it and look, Nigerians, these are the things you asked for in 95, you asked for them again in 2011, you asked for them again in 2007, you asked for them in 2014. So I can reasonably assume that these are the key issues you want us to deal with. Then Atiku can then separate them. Which of those things require an executive order? That means which one can he do by self?
Okay, we're almost out of time. Hold on. We've got less than a minute.
All right.
And
then we should do 2 hours.
I want to ask you very, very quickly.
Yes.
Mr. Atiku said he was going to do 1 term. Can he achieve all this in 1 term?
It is not necessary for a president who knows what he's doing to insist that the country will not exist after him.
Right. So we can hold him to his word.
After all, Nelson Mandela.
No, just a straight question. Can we hold him to that word, or that he's going to be there for 1 term?
The circumstances under which His Excellency Atiku Abubakar made those comments were very clear and they're in public space.
Right. So he is going to do 1 term.
When we get to that bridge, we will certainly cross it. But what I will say to you is this. Atiku Abubakar keeps his word and keeps his obligations. Whatever he says, whatever he signs up to, you can be rest assured that he will do it.
Okay.
He's not a flippant fellow and he doesn't play to the gallery. That Buhari said he would do 1 term and is now canvassing all over the place for a 2nd term does not mean that there are no men of integrity looking to be president. And Atiku will get Nigeria working again. Let everybody get on board. It's a new day beckoning, and we have our responsibility to go get our PVC and go and cast our vote for a new president.
Segun Showunmi, spokesman for the Atiku Campaign Organization, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Totally my pleasure.
Well, that's it for this edition of Nigeria, The Road to 2019. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.